Today, we're jumping into a really provocative critique that's been making some serious waves. We're going to break down this powerful argument about the Indian education system piece by piece and really get into its, at times, pretty shocking claims. And it all kicks off with this one huge question. Is the very system that's supposed to build our children's futures actually tearing them down? I mean, that's a pretty intense place to start, so let's unpack how the critique even gets there. So, first up, the argument tries to show us the sheer scale of what it calls a crisis. It uses some hard-hitting numbers to paint a picture of a system that it believes is deeply, deeply flawed. To really get a grip on what's at stake here, you have to start with this number, 250 million. That's how many students are in India's education system. It's the second largest in the entire world. The scale is it's absolutely massive. But then the critique hits you with this just staggering figure. It claims that despite how huge the system is, over 90% of graduates don't have the basic skills they need to get a job. Just let that sink in for a second. It's basically questioning the real value of what the system is providing. And then the argument takes a turn from just effectiveness to the absolutely devastating human cost. The source makes this alarming claim that because of the immense pressure, suicide is now the #1 cause of death for students. This one point just completely reframes the whole debate around the well-being of these kids. And this slide, wow, it really lays out what the source sees as the central problem, this huge disconnect. It suggests the system is designed to crank out one thing, toppers, marksheets, paper degrees, while the world we actually live in is crying out for something completely different. Innovators, leaders, and just confident, well-adjusted human beings. All right, so if that's the what, we've got to get to the why. Let's dig into the next part of the argument, which explores the reasons this is happening. And it uses a really powerful metaphor to explain how the system works. According to this critique, the root of the problem is something called rote learning. Just memorizing things through endless repetition. And the source claims this one single method has completely taken over the entire system, pushing aside every other way of actually learning. So what happens when you focus only on memorizing stuff? Well, the source calls it a skills vacuum. All these abilities that are absolutely critical for the 21st century, creativity, innovation, emotional intelligence, problem solving, they're not just put on the back burner. The argument is they're basically nowhere to be found in the curriculum. And this quote, man, it just nails the critique's main metaphor, that schools are basically factories. The idea here is that individuality isn't something to be celebrated. It's treated like a defect on an assembly line, where every single product is expected to come out exactly the same. And this factory model, what does it create? According to the source, it fuels this toxic rat race. It describes this relentless cycle that pushes students from their regular school to tuition centers to these coaching factories, all trapped in a never-ending loop of just preparing for the next exam. So, with that picture painted, the source then really doubles down. It starts asking these really provocative questions that are designed to make you challenge the fundamental beliefs that the entire system is built on. First up, it goes after the very structure of how we test students. It asks, should we even have these incredibly high-stakes board exams for kids who aren't even 16 yet? It's a direct challenge to one of the most accepted parts of the whole academic journey. And then, what about accountability? The argument goes, if students are graduating without the skills they need to survive in the real world, why aren't the schools themselves being held responsible for that? It kind of flips the blame from the student right back to the institution. And this last question, it really brings it all back home to the well-being of the students. It asks, in a system where the pressure is so intense that it's linked to the leading cause of death, why on earth isn't mental health taken just as seriously as math or science? Okay, so after laying out a pretty grim picture of the problem, the argument doesn't just leave us there. It pivots. It shifts from all the criticism towards a potential solution, a real call to action. And this is so important. Despite all the heavy criticism, the source doesn't say it's a lost cause. Not at all. It frames this whole situation not as a dead end, but as a turning point, a moment where real change is actually possible. So how do you actually make that change happen? Well, the source argues for a united front. It's a call for every single person with a stake in this, parents, teachers, principals, leaders, to all come together and demand a massive, fundamental shift. And what would this new system even look like? What would it prioritize? Well, according to the source, it's a total flip of the current model. The focus would move from just marks to actual meaningful skills, from memorization to real innovation, and from academic pressure to student well-being. This quote, it just beautifully sums up the vision, doesn't it? The idea of creating schools where kids learn how to think for themselves, instead of just being programmed with what to think. And that brings us to the final thought, the one question the source leaves hanging in the air for all of us to think about. It really gets to the heart of the whole argument. The possibility that these institutions, which were created to help dreams grow, might actually be the very things that are killing them. And that's a thought that's meant to stick with you.